What would you do if your manager of 12 years accused you of betrayal in front of your entire team over a job application she had no business reading? This is betrayal, pure and simple. Brianna's voice cracked as it echoed across the break room. She was standing there like a prosecutor in a courtroom, waving a piece of paper as if it were proof of some unspeakable crime. It wasn't. It was my job application, a private one she had no right to even see. I stood there, coffee mug in hand, watching the woman I had reported to for over a decade unravel in front of half the office. Her face was flushed red, her expensive blowout starting to frizz at the crown. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't have to. The silence in the room did all the talking. It was sharp, heavy. Everyone pretended to be focused on their coffee or granola bars, but I could feel the eyes on me, on her, on the story unfolding that no one had been prepared for. "How could you do this to me, Karen?" she shrieked, her voice rising with every syllable. "After everything I've done for you, everything she'd done for me." That almost made me laugh. I placed my mug gently on the counter, careful not to show anything on my face. I'd learned over the years that in Brianna's world, your calmness only made her angrier, but it was also the only thing that gave you power. "Actually, Brianna," I said, my voice low and level, "that's not a resignation letter. That's a job application I submitted through LinkedIn to a private employer. I'm curious, how exactly did you get access to that?" Her eyes narrowed into slits, and for a second the mask slipped. "That doesn't matter," she spat. "What matters is that you've been sneaking around behind my back. After 12 years of loyalty to this company, and to me, this is how you repay us, 12 years. 12 years of staying late to fix her mistakes, of shielding clients from her tantrums of building systems, and solving crises she didn't even understand. 12 years of being told maybe next year every time I brought up the raise I had clearly earned. And now she was calling me disloyal." "I've been exploring my options," I replied simply. "It's a competitive market. I think it's wise to stay informed." "Informed?" Her voice cracked. "Karen, you have everything you need here. I've protected you from pressure you can't even imagine. I've made sure you had job security, stability, and this is how you thank me." Behind her, Jennifer from accounting looked visibly uncomfortable, likely recalling all the times she'd heard Brianna call me difficult when I pushed back on her chaotic planning. This wasn't about loyalty. It was about power. It always had been. "I think we should finish this conversation in your office," I offered, still trying to preserve some shred of professionalism, but Brianna wasn't interested in quiet resolutions anymore. "No," she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "I think everyone here should know the truth. The kind of person you really are. Disloyal, ungrateful, sneaky." The words didn't hurt. Not anymore. Because in that moment, something inside me clicked, something I had buried deep down over the years while trying to survive under her leadership. The truth was simple. She wasn't angry that I applied for another job. She was terrified I might actually leave, because deep down, Brianna knew what I was just starting to admit to myself. Without me, she couldn't keep this place running. Not the clients, not the operations, not even her own reputation. My name is Karen Whitley. I'm 45 years old, and for the last 12 years I've worked as the Senior Logistics Coordinator at Northrise Apparel, a clothing distribution company based in Charlotte, North Carolina. 12 years of loyalty, 12 years of quiet sacrifice, and it had led to this public humiliation by the very person I had helped succeed. But to understand how we got here, how I ended up being framed as a traitor for simply knowing my worth, we need to rewind. Because this betrayal didn't start with a job application. It started the day I said yes to a job that would slowly drain me dry. 12 years ago, I walked into Northrise Apparel with quiet hope and a freshly signed divorce decree. I was 33, newly single, emotionally drained, and desperate for stability. Logistics wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. And steady back then felt like salvation. Brianna Lowe had hired me personally. She was 38 at the time, sharp as a knife with a Duke business degree and a designer blazer that looked like it cost half my rent. She was the kind of manager who talked about synergy in one breath and crushed you with numbers in the next. I admired her, I won't lie. Back then, I thought we were building something together. And for a while, we were. In the early years, I was a machine. I streamlined our vendor systems, fixed the shipping inconsistencies she inherited from her predecessor, and built direct relationships with our top-tier suppliers. Every crisis became my playground. I thrived on finding solutions. Brianna praised me publicly and leaned on me privately. We were a team, or so I thought. But then the cracks started to form. Around year 5, Brianna changed. She became possessive, obsessed with optics. She began copying herself on every email I sent, claiming it was just to stay in the loop. Process improvements I suggested were shot down only to resurface weeks later as Brianna's initiatives. My voice became an accessory to hers, and slowly it disappeared. Still, I pushed through, because I believed hard work spoke for itself, because I believed loyalty would pay off, because I believed that when the time came, she would advocate for me the way I had supported her. But belief is a fragile thing when matched against corporate ambition. I asked for my first raise after my 6th year. I had just renegotiated our supplier contract, saving the company nearly $200,000 a year. I came prepared, slides and all. Brianna listened, smiled, and said she'd bring it to the execs. 2 weeks later, she called me in. "Karen," she said with those practiced, empathetic eyes, "I fought for you. But corporate just isn't authorizing increases this cycle. Maybe next year. Maybe next year became a mantra. Maybe next year when I managed a warehouse crisis that should have sunk our Q3 targets. Maybe next year when I trained 2 junior hires and fixed their onboarding messes. Maybe next year after I ran a vendor satisfaction rate of 97% solo. Meanwhile, the company was booming. I found that out the hard way. During a vendor lunch in my 8th year, Janet Morrison, our fabric supplier, congratulated me on Northree's record-breaking profits. My smile froze. Record-breaking, I'd been told we were under tight budget controls. My raise requests had been denied on that basis repeatedly. That night, I stayed late, dug through vendor payments, shipping volumes, system logs. I pieced it together like a forensic accountant, and what I saw made my stomach flip. Not only was the company thriving, my division was a gold mine. Logistics, the department I ran almost entirely by myself, was creating hundreds of thousands in value each year. My conservative estimate, I was responsible for at least $800,000 in cost savings and efficiency gains annually. My salary, $62,000. It wasn't just neglect, it was robbery in a pencil skirt. Still, I told myself there had to be a reason, that maybe I was overreacting. But then came the kicker. Derek in purchasing got a $15,000 raise. Stephanie in customer service, promoted with a pay bump. Neither had half my workload. Neither had handled half the crises. When I brought it up to Brianna, she delivered her most insulting performance yet. "I value you, Karen," she said, tilting her head with fake concern. "But the executive team is focused on departmental equity. If we give you a raise, we'd have to do it across the board. It just wouldn't be fair." Fair. That word stuck in my throat like broken glass. It wasn't fair when Brianna took credit for my systems. It wasn't fair when I stayed late for a warehouse audit while she left for cocktails. It wasn't fair when I was told to develop my skills while she climbed the ladder off my back. I started documenting every incident, every time she deflected, every raise denied, every backhanded comment disguised as feedback, because somewhere deep inside me, I had decided something. Maybe next year would finally become never again. It started with a single notification, a soft ping from LinkedIn while I was eating dinner alone, curled up on my worn-out sofa, exhausted from yet another week of holding an entire department together with duct tape and willpower. "Patricia Wells from Gravora Group has viewed your profile." I didn't think much of it at first. Recruiters check profiles all the time. But 2 days later, I received a direct message. "Hi, Karen. I've been reviewing your logistics experience at Northrise Apparel. We're currently seeking a director of logistics operations for our East Coast division. Your profile stood out immediately. Would you be open to a confidential conversation? I reread it 3 times, unsure if it was real. Director, not coordinator, not manager, director, and the salary range. Nearly double what I was making. I didn't feel excited, not right away. The first feeling was shame, because deep down I realized something brutal. This wasn't validation, it was evidence. Evidence that I had wasted years waiting for someone who never planned to promote me. Still, I responded. Patricia and I scheduled a call. From the first moment, she spoke to me differently. She asked about my crisis protocols, my vendor negotiation strategies, my ideas for sustainable freight solutions. She wasn't just interested, she was listening. Karen, she said, during our second interview, your reputation precedes you. 2 of our suppliers mentioned you by name. That kind of trust isn't easy to earn. I almost cried when she said that. Not because I was emotional, but because no one at Northrise, especially not Brianna, had ever said anything like it. I passed every round of interviews. Each one was more invigorating than the last. And when the offer came, Senior Director of Logistics Operations, $95,000 annually, full benefits, and a clear track to VP, I didn't know what to do. I stared at the email for 10 minutes, heart racing. This was it, my chance, my escape, my recognition. But I hesitated. 12 years is a long time. And as twisted as it sounds, part of me felt like I owed Brianna, or maybe I just didn't want to burn bridges. So I gave her one last chance. I walked into her office with my best poker face. I've been thinking about my career path here, I started. There's been interest from another company, and I wanted to discuss potential growth opportunities at Northrise. She didn't even look up. Karen, she said flatly, we've discussed this. Your role is important, but your compensation is aligned with your responsibilities. Actually, I said slowly, the offer I received says otherwise. That got her attention. Her hands froze over her keyboard. What kind of offer, Senior Director? Logistics, Gravora Group. It's a significant pay increase. For a moment, I saw it. Panic. Then just as quickly it vanished. I see, she said coolly. And you think it's appropriate to use outside offers to pressure your current employer? I blinked. Was she serious? I'm not pressuring anyone. I said, I'm giving you the opportunity to retain someone who's brought significant value to this company. Her jaw clenched. Karen, you do your job. That's it. You follow the systems I built and manage accounts I helped you land. If you think you're irreplaceable, you're delusional. The words hit like a slap, not because they were cruel, but because they confirmed what I had long suspected. In her mind, I was nothing more than a cog, a replaceable gear in a machine she thought she ran. But the truth was, she didn't run it. I did. I smiled faintly. Thank you for your perspective. That night, I called Patricia and accepted Gravora's offer. No counter, no second guessing. It was time. My first day at Gravora Group felt like breathing fresh air after years in a windowless room. Patricia Wells, my new boss, greeted me with a firm handshake and a folder full of information that would rewrite everything I thought I knew about the logistics world. Inside were reports, client feedback, competitive analysis, vendor performance dashboards. But it was the list of prospective accounts that stopped me cold. Coastal Manufacturing, Pinnacle Textiles, Morrison Fabrics. My heart skipped. All 3 were major clients I had worked with during my time at Northrise Apparel. All 3 had been loyal for over a decade, and all 3 were apparently unhappy. These companies are looking to switch, Patricia explained, but they're hesitant. Their current provider knows their operations well, too well. We need someone who understands their systems, their rhythm. She didn't say it outright, but she didn't have to. That someone was me. I had spent years building those relationships. I knew their delivery patterns, their fiscal calendars, their quirks. I knew the exact rush order protocol for Coastal Manufacturing's summer collection. I knew Morrison's preferred route planner by name. I had smoothed over every missed shipment, every customs delay. Have they expressed specific concerns? I asked carefully. Morrison is frustrated with delays. Coastal says the flexibility's gone. Pinnacle is worried about sustainability reporting, says their provider's behind the times. I almost laughed. Every single concern they listed, I'd raised those exact issues at Northrise over the past 2 years and been told, that's just disruption. We don't need. Patricia then slid a folder across the table. Here's something else. Competitive analysis. Northrise Apparel. Inside were hard numbers. Declining delivery performance down 23% in 2 years. Customer satisfaction plunging. Turnover in the logistics team spiking. I recognized the signs. The ship was slowly sinking and Brianna didn't even see the leaks. How did you get all this? I asked. Vendors talk. And when we started hearing consistent concerns from shared partners, we listened. That evening, I went home and stared at my phone for an hour. Then I dialed Robert Uled at Morrison Fabrics. Karen, he answered after 2 rings. I heard you moved to Gravora Group. Congratulations. Thanks, Robert. I'm settling in well. I understand you've been having some issues lately. There was a long pause. Then a sigh. That's putting it mildly. He laid it out, plainly missed delivery windows, poor communication junior staffers who didn't understand the complexity of his orders. They assigned us some kid fresh out of college, Robert grumbled. I asked for adjustments and he tells me he needs to check with his team lead. Karen, you knew our system better than my own logistics department. That line, it hit me in the chest. You knew our system better than we did. Robert, I asked slowly, what would it take for you to consider transitioning to Gravora? There was silence on the other end. Then he chuckled. Are you making me an offer? 2 days later, Robert scheduled a formal meeting with Patricia and Gravora's onboarding team. Morrison Fabrics was prepared to sign a $1.2 million logistics contract, and that was just the beginning. If the call from Morrison Fabrics opened a door, the next 2 kicked it off its hinges. Less than 48 hours after Robert scheduled the transition meeting, I received a call from Jennifer Hayes, head of supply chain at Coastal Manufacturing. Her voice was clipped professional, but underneath I could hear the strain. Karen, I hope you don't mind me reaching out, she began. Robert Uled mentioned you're with Gravora Group now. Frankly, we're desperate for help. Desperate. That word did more damage to my heart than Brianna's screaming ever had. Jennifer and I had worked together for years. Coastal was always one of our most organized clients, planned every shipment months in advance, rarely needed last-minute changes. If they were struggling, it wasn't them. It was the service. She detailed missed delivery windows, inflexible scheduling, and worst of all, a brush-off from their new account manager when they raised concerns about quality. The final straw, she said bitterly, was last week. We had an urgent shipment. Instead of helping us find a workaround, the rep told us our expectations were unrealistic. Karen, you know us. You know we don't make unrealistic demands. I knew without a doubt that this wasn't just incompetence. It was the consequence of blind leadership. Brianna had taken one of our most efficient accounts and handed it to someone who didn't know the difference between a shipping label and a port hold. What would transitioning look like for you, I asked. We're ready, she said. We've been ready for months. But now that you're at Gravora, we know you get our needs. The moment you give us the green light, we'll begin. Less than a day later, the third call came. Margaret Torres, Sustainability Officer at Pinnacle Textiles. No preamble, no small talk. We're terminating our contract with Northrise Apparel, she said bluntly. Effective next month. I nearly dropped my phone. Margaret. They can't meet our reporting standards. Their sustainability efforts are surface level and frankly, we're tired of being brushed off. Are you interested in taking us on? I didn't even need to answer. My stunned silence said it all. That same week, I sat in my new office and watched 3 multi-million-dollar clients prepare to walk away from Northrise and follow me to Gravora. Combined, they represented over $3.5 million in annual logistics revenue. Patricia Wells was thrilled. The operations team was already drafting transition protocols, and for the first time in years, I felt invigorated. But I'd be lying if I said it was all satisfaction. There was something else, too, a bitter sadness that clung to me like humidity. These clients weren't just jumping ship because of me. They were running from the wreckage Brianna had created. The broken systems, the arrogance, the blind belief that people like me could be replaced without consequence. But nothing prepared me for what came next. Monday, 9:15 a.m. sharp. 3 certified letters landed on Brianna's desk at Northrise Apparel. Termination notices. Morrison, Coastal, Pinnacle. All 3 cited failure to meet service expectations. All 3 announced they were transferring operations to Gravora Group. All 3 had included one small pointed detail they specifically requested me by name to lead their accounts. At 9:53 a.m., my office phone rang. Karen Brianna's voice came through tight brittle. "We need to talk." I almost smiled. "Hello, Brianna. How can I help you?" "Don't play games with me," she hissed. "You poached our clients. This is sabotage. Corporate will take legal action." That was her default. Threats, control. "Brianna," I said calmly, "I didn't poach anyone. These companies came to us. You might want to ask yourself why 3 of your largest accounts chose to leave less than a month after my departure." The silence that followed was glorious. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from her before, small, fragile, she whispered, "Karen, can you talk to them? Convince them to stay. I made mistakes. We can fix this. Just help me." I laughed. "You want me to convince them to stay with the company that underpaid me, dismissed me, and accused me of being disloyal? Silence. I'm afraid that's not possible. My loyalty is with Gravora Group now." And with that, I hung up. By Wednesday afternoon, the storm Brianna tried to control had turned into a full-blown corporate disaster. Patricia's network buzzed with industry whispers. 3 major clients terminating contracts. In the same week, that wasn't a client service hiccup. That was a leadership failure. And Northrise's board knew it. We heard through vendors and mutual connections, emergency meetings, crisis emails, phone calls flying across time zones. The combined loss of Morrison Coastal and Pinnacle represented 32% of Northrise's annual logistics revenue. In less than 7 days, their foundation had crumbled, and I wasn't even finished unpacking my new desk yet. That Wednesday at 2:17 p.m., my cell buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Miss Whitley, this is David Patterson from Northrise Apparel's executive team. Do you have a moment?" I froze. David Patterson, Vice President of Operations, Brianna's boss, the same man who for 12 years had never once spoken directly to me. "I'm listening," I said, cautious. "We'd like to formally offer you your position back," he said, words clipped but rehearsed. "With a promotion to Director of Logistics and a significant salary increase. We've reassessed your contributions and realized we may have underestimated your value." "May have, Mr. Patterson," I replied, voice even. "I've received that promotion elsewhere, along with the respect I never got from Northrise." He cleared his throat. "We're prepared to be flexible. Compensation responsibilities name your terms. We're open." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered Brianna's voice hissing, "If you think you're irreplaceable, you're delusional." And the pity vanished. "I'm happy where I am," I said. "Thank you for the offer. My answer is final." Click. That was the moment it all clicked into place for me. This wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about liberation, about finally standing tall in a room that had spent over a decade trying to cut me down to size. By Friday, the chaos had gone public. Word spread fast in the Charlotte logistics community. Northrise's reputation was unraveling. Their service delays, their broken relationships, their executive dysfunction, people were talking. And the best part, I didn't have to say a word. I just let the truth speak. Gravora Group flourished. The 3 new contracts stabilized our East Coast portfolio. I hired 2 junior coordinators, bright, curious, and eager to learn. And this time I made sure to mentor them the way I wished Someone had mentored me. Brianna. According to the grapevine, she was reassigned, a polite corporate euphemism that usually meant pushed out quietly before the board votes. It was poetic. 12 years of being told to wait, to be patient, to trust the process. 12 years of watching promotions pass me by while others reaped the rewards of my labor. 12 years of being invisible until my absence became a spotlight. When people ask me now how I managed to get revenge, I tell them the truth: I didn't. I simply walked away and let gravity do the rest. Because sometimes the loudest revenge isn't a dramatic takedown. It's the deafening silence that follows when you finally stop saving the person who never deserved you in the first place. Have you ever been overlooked, underestimated, or undervalued by the very people who claim to support you? Share your story below what was your breaking point. And if you enjoyed this story of silent triumph, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon for more stories like this. You never know who might need the reminder you are not replaceable. Not when your value runs deeper than they ever bothered to see. I moved your inheritance into my name, starting fresh with someone younger who actually appreciates me. That was the first thing Greg said. No hello, no pause. Just those words laced with smugness and broadcast through my phone like an announcement of war. His voice was crackling through what sounded like a speakerphone with wind and waves and clinking glasses in the background. A beach resort, no doubt. Somewhere far from rainy Portland, Oregon, where I sat in our kitchen, alone listening to my 22-year marriage implode. Then came that laugh, that condescending, cruel little laugh that used to make me flinch, but now only made my grip on the wine glass tighten. I stared out at the rain streaking down the window, cool and steady, as if the sky itself was sighing with me. You really should have paid more attention to your accounts, sweetheart. The last word twisted like a knife, but I didn't flinch, not this time. My voice when it came was calm, steady, stone. You're right, I whispered. You deserve it. And then I hung up. My name is Danielle Foster, and I'm 45 years old. I've been a senior accountant at Hollowgate Systems for over a decade. Methodical, predictable, quiet. People assume I'm soft because I don't raise my voice, but they forget that silence can be strategic. I set my wine down and looked at the laptop still glowing on the kitchen table. The banking portal was open, frozen on the balance Greg had tried and failed to move. $600,000 plus the title to a secluded mountain cabin, all left to me by Uncle Theodore, the only family member who truly saw me. The only one who knew that being the quiet one doesn't mean you're weak. What Greg didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was that Uncle Theo was a man who'd been burned. A man who lost everything once to someone he trusted and spent the next 30 years building wealth and safeguards. When he died 18 months ago, he left me not just money but a system, a plan, a legacy of protection from predators, including charming golf-obsessed husbands with expensive wardrobes and younger girlfriends named Amber. I'd followed his instructions to the letter. That same Greg who had blown through his own savings chasing motorcycle dreams and restaurant investments he didn't understand now thought he could just reroute my inheritance like he was transferring airline miles. He had no idea how wrong he was. The phone rang again. Greg. I let it go to voicemail. Let him sit with his own audacity for a while. Outside, the drizzle thickened. The city was gray and quiet, just the way I liked it. For the first time in years, I let a small smile play across my lips. Not joy exactly, but something closer to satisfaction. He had no idea what he'd triggered. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. The girl with the spreadsheets while others danced at prom, the planner, the fixer. It's what drew me to Greg in the first place. His reckless ambition had a kind of magnetism I mistook for drive. I thought we'd build something together. A business, a family, a future. Instead, I built a safety net and Greg built lies. Through every failed venture, his short-lived construction firm, the cafe disaster, the crypto debacle, I picked up the pieces in silence. He mistook that silence for compliance. He never realized it was strategy. When Uncle Theo died, I mourned him with my entire being, not just because he was kind, but because he understood. He used to tell me, "Danielle, protect what you build, even from the people who say they love you." I thought he was being paranoid. Turns out he was being brilliant. He left me not just a fortune, but a blueprint. I'd spent weeks meeting with his advisor, Patricia Wells, a sharp woman who didn't blink twice when I told her I wanted full asset protection. We structured the funds through Gravora Group Private Banking, a firm known for absolute discretion. Passwords were the beginning. There were biometric locks, fraud alerts, authorization protocols, and a clause that would revoke all spousal claims if fraud was detected. Greg's name wasn't on a single document. The money he'd tried to transfer, it wasn't even in the account he thought it was in. I'd left a small amount in our joint account for appearances. The rest was fortified behind a firewall of legal armor. And he'd just kicked that firewall with his bare feet. By the time he made that call, the fraud alert had already triggered. The systems were in motion. Every attempt he made would be documented, flagged, traceable. And I hadn't said a word until now. I poured another glass of wine and opened a new document on my computer. To-do list, I typed. Call Jennifer Patterson, divorce attorney. Notify Patricia at Gravora to prepare logs. Forward Greg's voicemail and number to legal folder. Find my old PI's contact info. Cancel Greg's access to utilities and joint subscriptions. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. In fact, for the first time in years, I felt awake. Alive. In control. Let him think he'd won. Let him sip his margarita next to his 28-year-old bartender-turned-girlfriend and laugh about how he'd outsmarted his boring accountant wife. Because the next time he checked his account balance, it wouldn't be 6 figures waiting for him. It would be a freeze notice, and maybe a federal investigation. Greg Foster had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he didn't even know it yet. Before I could go forward, I had to rewind to the years when the cracks began forming beneath the surface, silent and invisible, like hairline fractures in a porcelain vase. Greg and I met at the University of Oregon. I was 22, fresh-faced, and obsessed with balance sheets and budget modeling. He was 24, a business major with a dazzling smile and a way of speaking that made you believe he'd already made his first million. I was drawn to his energy. He called me grounding. I thought we'd be unstoppable together, a dreamer and a doer. And for a while, we were. We got married in a tiny ceremony under the fall leaves at Silver Falls. No debt, just vows and hope. We moved into a modest apartment in Beaverton, and I started my first real accounting job while Greg bounced from one business idea to another. The first was a custom furniture startup. 6 months later, we were left with unsold inventory, a pile of unpaid vendor bills, and a garage that smelled like varnish for a year. Then came the craft beer bar, then a wellness cafe, then crypto. Each time I cleaned up the mess, I filed the taxes. I negotiated with creditors. I pulled from savings to make sure the mortgage got paid. I made excuses at family dinners when he didn't show up or had a new partner in the works. I learned to absorb the disappointment without letting it leak out of me. I didn't complain, not because I was weak, but because I was calculating. I knew I had to wait for the right moment, the right leverage to make a move that would stick. Greg mistook that for passivity, but he never understood the long game. The shift came when Uncle Theodore passed away last year. I hadn't seen Greg cry at the funeral, not once, but I cried for both of us, for the man who'd been a second father to me, and for the loss of the only person who ever gave me unfiltered financial advice without judgment. He'd been quiet and intense, with the kind of eyes that saw 3 steps ahead. His first fortune vanished when he was 35, taken by a charming friend who rerouted company assets and left him with IRS debt and a reputation in tatters. It took Uncle Theodore nearly 20 years to rebuild, but he didn't rebuild with vengeance. He rebuilt with systems. He often said paranoia is just experience with a longer memory. I used to roll my eyes at that. But now I realize it was wisdom written in scars. He left me $600,000 in assets and the deed to a cabin near Mount Hood, but that wasn't the real gift. The real gift was a binder he called the Fortress File. In it were his instructions: create layers, use blind trusts, separate all inherited assets from marital ones, never put both names on anything, vet your advisors like you'd vet a heart surgeon, and most of all, if someone ever tries to take what isn't theirs, let them hang themselves with their own rope. So I did exactly that. Within weeks, I was meeting quietly with Patricia Wells, a partner at Gravora Group Private Banking. Patricia had a reputation for turning inheritances into fortified kingdoms. Together, we set up 2 irrevocable trusts, one for the cabin and one for the cash. We routed the funds through multiple shell accounts that only I controlled. It wasn't about hiding, it was about protecting. The kicker. We built in an automatic revocation clause. If anyone, Greg included, tried to access the funds illegally, it would immediately revoke any shared claims they had to any of our assets. It wasn't just smart, it was bulletproof. Greg, meanwhile, was on a networking tour. That's what he called it. A series of weekend golf trips and overnight stays in cities where he claimed he was meeting potential partners. But I wasn't blind. He was dressing younger, spending more, making cryptic comments about feeling boxed in and ready for something fresh. He stopped asking how my day was, but he did start asking about the inheritance. At first, it was casual jokes about our mountain cabin and whether we could invest some of the money into a new venture. I deflected, gave vague answers, watched his tone shift over time from curiosity to entitlement. That's when I knew he was planning something. So I set the first trap. One morning, I left a fake bank statement on my desk just carelessly enough for him to spot. It showed a balance of $127,000 in an account that didn't exist. Sure enough, within a week, I caught him taking a photo of it through the reflection in my laptop screen. I didn't confront him. I just made a note. Then I hired a private investigator. For weeks, I said nothing while the PI tracked Greg's movements. He wasn't networking. He was spending long weekends in Phoenix with a woman named Amber, a bartender with a social media feed full of poolside selfies and diamond earrings. The same diamond earrings that showed up on Greg's credit card bill. The lies weren't just emotional, they were financial. And in my world, that's even worse. So I began building my evidence folder: screenshots, receipts, surveillance photos, texts, a paper trail so clean even the IRS would weep with gratitude. And then, on a rainy Thursday morning, Greg made his move. He called Gravora, pretending to be my financial advisor, claimed he needed access to my accounts, asked for passwords. When that didn't work, he tried again, this time in person. What he didn't know was that every call was logged, every attempt was documented, every IP address flagged. And when he finally tried to initiate the transfer, thinking he'd finally cracked my secret stash, the system locked down. His voice on the phone that afternoon, the one where he told me he'd move my money, wasn't confidence. It was delusion. He genuinely believed he'd won. But the moment he clicked transfer, he triggered 3 things: an automatic fraud lock on the account, a federal suspicious activity report filed with his name attached, the revocation clause that stripped him of his rights to our home, our shared accounts, and my retirement funds. And I poured a glass of wine and watched the rain fall. The next morning, just as I was finishing my first cup of coffee, Greg called again. This time his tone was different. There was no smugness, no swagger, just fear raw and cracking through the phone line. "Danielle, what the hell is going on? I tried to transfer the money yesterday and now the bank's saying there's some kind of investigation. They froze everything." I took a long sip of my coffee. The morning drizzle outside continued its gentle rhythm against the kitchen window. I hadn't slept that well in months. "Good morning to you too, Greg," I said calmly. "How's your golf trip going?" "Cut the crap." "What did you do?" I smiled into my cup, the warmth of the Colombian roast grounding me in the moment. I didn't do anything. But apparently, you tried to commit bank fraud. That tends to trigger automatic security protocols. There was silence on the line long enough for me to wonder if he'd hung up. Then I heard him again breathing hard. "I'm your husband. I have rights to that money. Actually, you don't." I stood and walked to the window, watching the mist roll in over the hills beyond our backyard. Uncle Theodore's inheritance was placed in a protected trust, Greg, specifically designed to prevent unauthorized access. You tried to move funds without permission. That's fraud. You're lying. Married couples share assets automatically, not inherited assets placed in trust, especially not when the trust is written to protect the beneficiary from opportunists. That last word landed like a stone in a still pond. The bank considers your attempted transfer identity theft an attempted grand larceny. The line was quiet again. Then I heard her laughter. That same soft, syrupy giggle I'd heard in the background of Greg's call the day before. Amber. She had no idea she was cuddled up next to a man who had just tripped every wire in a financial fortress. A man who had no money, no access, and no plan. Danielle, you need to fix this. Call the bank and tell them you authorized the transfer. I walked back to the table and sat down. Why would I do that? Because we're married. Because you love me. No, Greg. You called yesterday to tell me you were leaving me for someone younger. You lied about this golf trip. You tried to steal my inheritance and ride off into the sunset. I let that hang in the air. He exhaled shakily. I can explain everything. I'm sure you can, I said flatly, but I'm not interested in hearing it. My lawyer will be in touch. You can't do this. That money belongs to both of us. No, I interrupted, voice ice cold. It really doesn't. And thanks to your little stunt yesterday, you've just made my divorce attorney's job incredibly easy. And then I hung up. I turned off my phone and exhaled. The tension didn't vanish, but it morphed into something sharper, focused, clear. Today was going to be a very productive day. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in the sleek downtown office of Patterson & Associates. I'd consulted them 3 months ago quietly when Greg's behavior had first changed. My attorney, Jennifer Patterson, was a seasoned divorce specialist with a keen eye for financial misconduct. Danielle, I have to say this is one of the cleaner cases I've seen in years, Jennifer said, flipping through the evidence folder I'd handed her. Your husband essentially gift-wrapped his own downfall. I'd come prepared. Screenshots of his credit card activity over the past 6 months, multiple charges at out-of-town hotels, dinner reservations for 2 jewelry receipts. I had banking records showing attempted transfers from our joint account. I even brought time-stamped logs of failed access attempts at Gravora. Jennifer tapped her pen against the folder. What I don't understand is how he thought he could access a protected trust without the authorization codes. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a series of old text messages. He's been asking for my passwords for months, claimed he wanted to help manage finances. I gave vague answers, but I think he was watching me when I logged in. Truthfully, I knew he was watching. That's why I'd baited him. The fake bank statement left accidentally on my desk had been printed on Gravora-branded paper but listed a non-existent account. He'd taken the bait. I saw him through the reflection in my monitor snapping a photo of the document like he was in some low-rent spy movie. He had the wrong account number, the wrong bank, the wrong everything, and that's exactly how I wanted it. There's something else, I added, pulling another document from my folder. Greg's been slowly draining our joint account. Nothing dramatic, but over time it added up to nearly $15,000. Jennifer's eyebrows shot up. Where was it going? A bank account I didn't recognize. I had a private investigator trace it last month. It's under his name only. He used it to pay for his affair hotel rooms, flights, expensive meals, even a spa weekend. I handed her another envelope, photos of Greg and Amber in Phoenix, receipts, video stills. Jennifer flipped through them, visibly impressed. Danielle, this is outstanding. With this kind of documentation, we can file on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. And thanks to the failed inheritance transfer, we've got attempted fraud on record. He has zero footing. I leaned forward. There's more. I explained the revocation clause, the one Theodore had insisted we include. If Greg ever tried to claim or transfer funds from the trust illegally, he would automatically forfeit any claim to shared marital assets. Jennifer sat back in her chair and let out a low whistle. So the moment he tried to move the money, everything else legally became mine. She shook her head amazed. Your uncle was a genius. He was I said, my voice softening, and he warned me, not just about Greg, but about people who think loyalty is weakness. At 11 a.m., just as I was leaving Jennifer's office, my phone rang. Patricia Wells from Gravora. Mr. Foster has been calling our offices repeatedly since 8 this morning. She said, her voice calm, but with a trace of amusement. He seems to believe he can resolve the situation by speaking to a supervisor, and we've informed him that any attempted unauthorized access to protected accounts is automatically escalated to federal banking authorities. His Social Security number has been flagged in our system. Any future attempts will trigger immediate law enforcement notifications. I laughed softly. Patricia, that's even better than I expected. She wasn't done. There's something else. We reviewed prior activity. Mr. Foster made several calls in February claiming to be your financial advisor. He also visited one of our branches in person and attempted to request account information under false pretenses. My grip tightened on the phone. He did what we flagged it as suspicious at the time. But now, in light of recent events, it demonstrates a clear pattern of premeditation. We've logged every incident. I'll have documentation sent to your attorney within the hour. Greg hadn't just made a mistake. He'd built a case against himself brick by brick. By the time I returned to my office at Hollowgate Systems that afternoon, I'd already forwarded Patricia's full documentation to Jennifer. I walked through the sleek glass doors with my head held high, not to make a scene, but because I refused to shrink anymore. No one at work knew what was unfolding behind the scenes, and I planned to keep it that way. But that plan didn't last long. Just before lunch, my supervisor, David Walsh, knocked gently on my office door. His expression was somewhere between curious and concerned. Danielle, there are 2 people here to see you. They say they're with federal banking enforcement. I felt my heart hiccup, but I nodded. Send them in, please. 2 agents stepped into my office. A woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense air, and a younger man with a sharp haircut and government-issued blandness. They introduced themselves as Agent Martinez and Agent Thompson and handed me their credentials. Mrs. Foster, we're investigating suspicious activity related to your inheritance. Trust Agent Martinez began settling into the chair across from my desk. Your banking institution has flagged multiple attempted unauthorized transfers, one of which occurred yesterday. We understand your husband Gregory Foster may have been involved. I closed my laptop and gave them my full attention. That's correct, I said. He called me from what he claimed was a golf trip, laughing, saying he'd move my inheritance into his name. I knew immediately it wasn't possible, but he was very confident. Agent Thompson was scribbling notes. Have there been prior incidents where your husband tried to access your accounts? Not that I was aware of until Patricia from Gravora told me this morning. He's been making calls for months, claimed to be my financial advisor, even visited a branch. Agent Martinez nodded. We've received those logs. There was a pause. Mrs. Foster, we need to inform you that this isn't simply a civil matter. Attempting to gain unauthorized access to federally protected financial trusts can constitute bank fraud, identity theft, and financial impersonation, all federal offenses. I nodded. I assumed as much. Agent Thompson looked up from his notebook. If proven, the penalties could include up to 20 years in federal prison, especially given the evidence of premeditation. I felt the weight of it settle in the air like dust. 20 years. 20 years of freedom traded for lies and a woman named Amber, who probably thought she'd hit the jackpot. Do you have evidence of communication? Martinez asked. Yes. Voicemails, texts, screenshots. And a private investigator tracked Greg's movements for the past 6 weeks. He was in Phoenix last weekend, not at a golf resort. Martinez handed me a card. We'll need you to come in and make a formal statement. Bring all materials. The bank is cooperating. And your documentation will help solidify the case. As they left, I stood at the window and stared out at the gray Portland skyline. My reflection stared back, calm, composed, and unrecognizable, from the woman who used to sit here, wondering why her husband had become a stranger. I was no longer waiting for things to get better. I was making them better one cold, calculated step at a time. My phone buzzed again. Greg. I stared at the screen before answering. I didn't speak, just let the silence stretch. "Danielle, please," he blurted. "There are agents asking questions. They called me this morning. This has gone too far, has it?" He inhaled sharply. "I made a mistake, okay. I got scared about the future, about money, about you leaving. But we can fix this. We always fix things right." I walked to the bookshelf and traced my fingers along the edge of a framed photo from our early years, young hopeful standing outside that first little apartment in Beaverton. "We can't fix this, Greg, because this wasn't a mistake. You planned this. You opened secret accounts. You lied. You stole. You watched me enter passwords when I thought you were asleep. And then you tried to commit bank fraud." His voice cracked. "I didn't know it was that serious. You tried to take something that wasn't yours. That's theft. You weren't just leaving me. You were robbing me." A pause. Then, like a last-ditch Hail Mary. "What do you want from me? What will it take to make this go away?" I closed my eyes. Let the question sit there heavy and trembling. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing you can do to make this go away. You did this to yourself." And then I ended the call. I went to lunch, ate a chicken Caesar wrap from the cafe downstairs while reviewing invoices. I pretended like it was just another Thursday, because that's how you win with men like Greg, not by yelling, not by crying, but by showing up, calm, clear, and unshakable. 3 days later, as I was seasoning vegetables at home for dinner, Agent Martinez called again. "Mrs. Foster, I wanted to inform you that we've taken your husband into custody." I set down my wooden spoon. "Where Phoenix? He was attempting to board a flight to Costa Rica with his companion when TSA flagged his passport. He was detained at the gate." My breath caught for half a second. "He was running," yes, Martinez said. "And given the circumstances, his attempt to flee may further support charges of consciousness of guilt." After hanging up, I stood at my kitchen window and sipped a glass of wine while the vegetables roasted. The world outside was misty and still, and for the first time in years, so was I. That night I called Jennifer. She laughed, practically giddy. "That's it. This speeds up everything. A spouse in federal custody for financial crimes. He won't touch your assets. He won't even get visitation rights for the dog." We both laughed. It wasn't just relief, it was closure poured into every line of that conversation. The next morning, I received a new voicemail from Amber. "This is Amber. I don't know what the hell you told the feds, but Greg is a good man. You're just bitter and jealous. He's never been happier than he is with me." I played it twice, then typed a reply. "Tell Greg that when he's arraigned for bank fraud, he'll have plenty of time to reflect on how happy you make him." Seconds later, another reply. "Wait. What arraignment?" I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to Jennifer with a note ongoing contact from affair partner, additional documentation of infidelity. Then I turned off my phone, packed my briefcase, and headed to the office. Greg had spent months trying to orchestrate a betrayal, but he'd never realized he was just playing a role in a play Uncle Theodore had written a long, long time ago. The day Greg was formally charged felt eerily mundane. I was at work reconciling invoices when my phone buzzed with an email from Jennifer Patterson. Subject update. Greg Foster criminal case body. Greg was arraigned this morning. Bail denied. Charges include attempted bank fraud, identity theft, and misrepresentation of fiduciary access. Attached copy of formal complaint and hearing schedule. I didn't cry, I didn't cheer. I simply saved the documents to my legal folder, took a sip of lukewarm coffee, and kept typing. A few hours later, the news broke publicly. Local press reported the arrest of a Portland man detained in Phoenix for attempting to flee the country while under federal investigation. No names were listed initially, but those who knew us. My sister Catherine, a few old friends from college, put two and two together. By evening, my voicemail was full. The first message was from Amber, angry, sputtering, incoherent. "This is all your fault. You're destroying a good man because you're bitter because he found someone who actually loves him." The second message was shorter. "You win. Is that what you wanted? And the third caught me off guard. Please. He's scared. They took his passport. They're saying prison. I didn't sign up for this. Amber's tone had shifted from smug to shaken, and for a second I felt something unexpected pity. But then I remembered the sound of her laughter in the background of that first call, the glee in her voice when she thought she'd won. She hadn't. Greg hadn't either. They'd gambled on a lie and lost to something they never understood: preparation. The next morning, I was making coffee when the doorbell rang. A courier stood outside holding a thick envelope from Gravora Group Private Banking. Inside were new account credentials, security logs, and a handwritten note from Patricia Wells. All security protocols have been reset. Your inheritance remains fully protected and has continued accruing interest during this period. Your uncle would be proud. I stared at the words for a long moment. Uncle Theodore hadn't just left me wealth. He'd left me a shield, a map, a playbook for navigating betrayal with grace and power. 6 weeks later, I stood in Multnomah County Court facing a monitor where Greg appeared via video feed in a tan detention-issued jumpsuit. His hair was unkempt, his voice was hollow. He didn't speak during the hearing, not even once. Jennifer laid out everything with ruthless clarity: the fraudulent access attempts, the stolen joint funds, the infidelity, the premeditated impersonation of a fiduciary. Your Honor, she said, her voice sharp as a scalpel, the defendant not only betrayed the trust of a 22-year marriage, he attempted to weaponize that trust for financial gain. He forfeited his right to any marital assets the moment he engaged in criminal conduct. The Judge Hanen, Marlene Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s, nodded solemnly as she reviewed the evidence. I have reviewed the revocation clause in the trust documentation, she said, tapping her gavel lightly. As of the date of attempted fraud, Mr. Foster legally forfeited all claim to marital property. This divorce is granted with prejudice. All financial arrangements are final and non-negotiable. And just like that, it was done. I walked out of the courthouse with the finalized decree in one hand and my purse in the other. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Catherine saw the news about Greg's sentencing. 28 months in federal prison. You okay? I smiled. Never been better. That afternoon, I met with Patricia again. We sat across from each other in the private client wing of Gravora Group, sipping peppermint tea and reviewing portfolio updates. The trust had grown by another 4% during the legal storm. The cabin had appreciated in value thanks to a new hiking trail expansion nearby. And combined with my share of our former joint savings and untouched retirement account, I was now in a position I'd never imagined: free liquid and fully self-determined. But that wasn't what moved me most. What moved me was the envelope Patricia slid across the table, cream-colored with a familiar signature on the seal. I almost forgot, she said. Your uncle left this with me. He said to deliver it once all legal matters were resolved. My hands trembled slightly as I broke the wax. Inside was a letter. Short, precise, pure, Theodore, Danielle. If you're reading this, it means someone tried to take what wasn't theirs. I hope my preparations helped, but more than that, I hope you remember what matters most. Peace of mind. Build something beautiful with what remains. T. I blinked hard, folded the letter, and tucked it into my purse. Build something beautiful. He didn't mean just a business. He meant a life. In the weeks that followed, I took a break from work. Not to escape, but to build. I'd seen too many women over the years stuck in situations like mine, financially dependent on men who didn't respect them, too afraid to plan for independence. So I began sketching out an idea, a financial literacy nonprofit focused on helping women quietly, discreetly build financial defenses, inheritance protection, divorce preparation, legal awareness, the Fortress Fund. It started as a quiet blog with a downloadable checklist. Then women started emailing, then sharing, then asking for workshops. Uncle Theodore's legacy was evolving, becoming something bigger than both of us. And me, I didn't retire. I didn't run off to the mountains. I stayed in Portland, kept working part-time, kept showing up with my head held high, and every time someone asked how I was doing, I'd smile and say, better than ever. Because it wasn't just about what Greg took, it was about what he couldn't take. It's strange really how quickly the silence can become your sanctuary when the chaos ends. There's no more stomping boots on hardwood floors, no slamming doors late at night, no urgent business trips with golf bags and too much cologne, no passive-aggressive questions about grocery budgets or subtle jabs about how accountants don't understand risk. Just peace. The kind of peace that doesn't scream for attention but settles into your bones like warmth. I sat on the back deck of my home one cool Saturday morning, cradling a mug of coffee, watching as the sun threaded itself through the Portland clouds. It had been almost 2 months since the court finalized my divorce, 38 days since Greg was sentenced to 28 months in federal prison, and just 5 since the Fortress Fund launched its official nonprofit status. In that time, something inside me had shifted, not broken, not hardened, but sharpened. I used to think being the quiet one meant I had to accept less. That discretion was the same as submission. That being the rock meant you let the waves crash into you without complaint. But Uncle Theodore was right. The real wealth isn't in your account balance. It's in knowing that you're untouchable, not because no one tries, but because they fail. I glanced at the cabin deed that now sat framed in my study. Mount Hood, untouched and waiting. My little retreat. A few weeks earlier, Patricia Wells had called with more good news. The trust had surpassed its 5-year growth benchmark. Interest investments and value appreciation had turned the original $600,000 into nearly $710,000. And the cabin estimated at $400,000. Combined with my untouched retirement savings and the car Greg once mocked me for keeping for too long, I was comfortably set for the rest of my life. And yet I didn't feel like retreating. Not yet. Instead, I felt called to something else. I kept thinking about the emails that came flooding into the Fortress Fund's inbox, women of all ages writing from across the country. My husband starting to ask for passwords. Is that a red flag? My sister-in-law keeps asking if my trust is family shareable. I think my ex is planning to drain our joint account. What do I do? Each message was a mirror to a moment I'd lived and survived, so I answered them, one by one, late at night, between client audits, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with wine, but always with empathy and sharpness, and always with the reminder, you're not weak, you're just unarmed, but not anymore. Last week, I stood on a small stage at a women's networking event in downtown Portland, delivering a speech titled, "When Silence is Strategy, Protecting Yourself Financially Before It's Too Late." The room was packed. I didn't tell them all the details. I didn't need to. But I did tell them what mattered, how wealth can be stolen quietly, how the most dangerous betrayal comes with a smile, and how preparation is not paranoia, it's self-respect. Afterward, a woman approached me, maybe late 30s, tight smile, tired eyes. "You're not just telling my story," she whispered. "You're showing me how it ends." I squeezed her hand gently. "No," I said. "I'm showing you how it begins." Sometimes at night I reread the letter from Uncle Theodore. Build something beautiful with what remains. He didn't mean a revenge plan. He meant a legacy, something enduring, something clean and brave and real. The betrayal was never the end. It was the catalyst. Greg tried to erase me from my own life. He thought his charm and timing could outwit my planning, that he could fly to paradise with a girl who didn't even know his middle name and ride off with money he didn't earn. He was wrong. Because while he was planning his escape, I was building a firewall of legal precision and quiet resolve. While he lied, I documented. While he drifted away, I watched and waited. And when he made his move, I didn't yell. I didn't panic. I simply stepped forward into the fortress I'd built, one line of code, one clause, one cautionary conversation at a time. And now I get to choose everything. Where I live, who I help, how I spend my mornings, whether I ever let another person back into the most sacred parts of my life. That's real freedom. That's peace of mind. That's the true inheritance. Final reflection. So if you've ever been underestimated by someone who swore they loved you, if you've ever been made to feel less than because you were careful, cautious, or calm, if you've ever been left picking up pieces, someone else shattered, let me tell you something. The quiet ones. We don't break. We build. And when the time is right, we rise. On our own terms. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely and turned that pain into power? Share your story in the comments. And if you found strength in this journey, hit that like, subscribe, and join us as we share more true stories of betrayal turned into rebirth. You're not alone. You're just getting started.